Charles, thanks for joining me back on Geared for Growth.
Mate, it's good to be here. How's things?
Things are pretty good, mate. I'm just nervous. Anytime I get you on, I wonder, is this the one that cancels me after 400 episodes or whatever it is? So, be on your best behavior. Last time,
right, mate.
I don't even know what we were talking about, but what's topical at the moment, and I've just done an episode with Jeremy, the accountant par excellence, about trusts, and there's been quite a bit of chatter from some buyers agents that have raised the alarm about the industry and some of this kind of finfluencer stuff where people are saying all you need to do is set up a trust and then the banks can't see your debt and you can just kind of go on forever. And whether you agree or not, you're a finfluencer with a big profile. I'm interested in your insights. Firstly, with the kind of the financial advice through Instagram and TikTok sort of model, what are you seeing there? And do you think that's just the way the world works now, or is that something that probably needs a bit more regulation?
Yeah, so I think the trust lending side of things, obviously it can be a great enabler to grow your portfolio. However, and I did start talking about it a lot, a couple of years ago, and look, I'm maybe part of the problem why it's so big at the moment, but wasn't the intention. But every video that I used to post about that blew up a lot. And obviously that was because people were very hungry for information on the topic, as I was years ago before I got into being a broker myself. But now I think it's being flogged a bit too hard. I think it does work very well, and I've got properties that I've bought myself through trusts, but it's being thrown out there as like a silver bullet, which it's not. I think it's just you need to have a broker that understands it at a proper level, because you can, if you're on a big income, like if you're on 200K, 250K, 300K plus, then you don't want to be going into a trust for the first, second or third property. You can likely stretch that out, and you don't want to go into trusts prematurely because you'll just give yourself a heap of costs that you actually didn't need and headache. But the other side of the coin is if you're on 60 grand or something, then the best thing you can do is actually increase your income to get more lending, not so much buy through a trust, and it's going to unlock this 20 property portfolio.
Yeah, and that's I suppose mirrors the conversation that I had with Jeremy to say, look, max yourself out in your personal name first. It seems like there's this idea that hitting yourself or getting stuck, like hitting yourself on the serviceability ceiling or getting stuck, is actually a bad thing. But he kind of encouraged us and challenged us to think, well, that's actually just part of the process. Like, run your personal name, because you've got the capital gains tax discounts and other things like the way that, say, depreciation works in your personal name rather than a trust that's sort of being quarterized there waiting for a future gain. There's definite positives to buying in your own name. There's nothing wrong with maxing out your serviceability there before you go to a trust, would you say?
Yeah, you don't want to completely max it out, because that's another mistake people make. They go, all right, I've now maxed out in my personal name, so I'll go and buy in a trust. But if you've maxed out in your personal name and you go to a trust, you still can't get any lending, because the lending's based off your overall circumstance, your whole personal name, debt, all that sort of thing. So you need to, if you've got, say, $2 million worth of serviceability, I would say, you can do the first 2 or 3 in your personal name. So you've got maybe 1.2, 1.4 mil debt or something like that. And then when you want to buy the last one for $500,000, $600,000, then you can go and move into a trust and preserve your borrowing capacity for the next one. However, as you know, the trust has to be positive for that to be the case. So it's not going to be the silver bullet that gives you more lending straight away. But obviously, once that entity is in a positive position, then that person can technically go and have that borrowing capacity back, as long as we've got an accountant's letter to confirm that the entity is profitable.
Yes, and that's another thing that we talked about, this magical accountant's letter, which I'd hate to think this being the case, but it sort of seems like there might be some evidence that an accountant's letter is up for sale.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure the Tax Practitioners Board would take an interest in.
Yeah. I mean, I think that a good accountant will want to see that the entity is clearly profitable before they write that letter. But I'm sure that there is accountants out there that, have done it without the right evidence and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, if you're doing that as an accountant or as a client, you're also putting yourself at risk, because there's no point getting more lending if you can't afford it. There's no
Not
point
everyone
buying a
looks good in
property that.
orange either, do
Yeah,
they?
no, that's right. It's not ideal if you buy a property and then have to sell it 6 months later because you've made it look as if you can afford the payments, but you actually can't. So that's another big thing with trust lending. Whenever we get someone that wants to go down that route, we have to give them caution to say, yes, you're excluding this debt, but we still need to factor it into your overall situation because we don't want you to get into debt that you can't afford because it's not productive for anyone.
So let's break it down. We've got, let's say we had 2 mil of serviceability and we've got, I don't know, 1.5 million thereabouts of property in our own name, and we're buying a property in a trust. So from the eyes of a bank, a trust is an entity unto itself, but you also do need a deposit to purchase the property. So that links you back. And then we go, okay, we've bought a property in this trust structure. We are kind of stuck until that reaches a positive position. So we could either buy with a bigger deposit and getting it as close as we can, maybe some rental growth. We could force value with the renovation. But once that trust goes into a positive state, what's the next step there? The Geared for Growth Property Investing podcast is presented by our business, MCG Quantity Surveyors. If you're an investor or a property professional looking to get the best tax depreciation deductions for yourself or your clients, please get in touch with us at mcgqs.com.au. It's our mission to help as many property investors as we can to maximise their claims and maximise their property education as well.
So if your trust goes into a positive state, then you can exclude the debt within that trust. So if you've got $500,000 worth of debt in that trust and it's positive, you get that accountant's letter. Technically, if your whole situation is still the same as it was when you got that loan, you'll be able to get that $500,000 worth of borrowing capacity either back in your personal name or in another entity. Keeping in mind that sometimes the difference between personal name and entity lending can be different, but yeah, roughly you should be able to get that back.
So we obviously needed our personal serviceability to get the first one in the trust to begin with, but then once that goes to positive, it's ceased to exist, right? And we've still got the personal serviceability to go into a second trust, but then we've also got the establishment costs and the running costs of the trust. So it begs the question, like, how much modeling should somebody do with a financial planner or their accountant before they're making this decision to go on this trust collection exercise, like a schoolies on a Kentucky sort of passport stamping rage?
Well, yeah, it comes down to the same thing as being on schoolies. You've got to be responsible for yourself, and everyone's not all the time.
I can imagine you at schoolies, mate, and I think there's a glass house you're chucking stones in.
Yeah, you might be right there. But I didn't go to schoolies, mate, because I dropped out when I was 16. But anyway, if I did...
That just means you started it 2 years early.
Exactly. With the lending side of it, you need to, when you get this lending in the entity, like I said before, you just need to make sure that when you run your personal numbers, you're including the payments in that trust.
Yep.
So just because the bank's no longer looking at it, you still have to account for it yourself. So whether you're doing that with an accountant, your broker, your financial advisor, you can probably do it with either party, but it comes down to you because the buck stops with you taking responsibility for your own actions.
You said something so sensible before that it made me kind of wonder if I was still talking to you. And that was, if you're on DK and you're maxed out, the easiest thing is to increase your income.
Yeah.
Now, there's a couple of really simple things that I think people don't think about, and they just go straight to the trust. Like, oh, I maxed out. All I've got is a trust. Now, your personal income, how much does that really matter when I'm sitting down with you as a broker and I'm on, let's say 60 or 80K? If I can find myself an extra 10K pay rise in a year or maybe over a couple of years, like what difference is that going to make to us?
Yeah, I mean, if you're on a lower income and you've already got a property in your personal name, if you're on 80K, then it's pretty unlikely that you're going to get a property, whether that's in your personal name again or inside a trust. But even with most people, if you want to build, this is the thing that I think is underspoken about. That's not a very good word, but I don't know, exposed is the fact that people see these buyers agents and brokers, whatever they are, with 5, 10, 20, 30 properties, and they don't realize that those guys are earning $2, $3, $4 million a year. So if you want to get 50 properties, you need to increase your income. You can use all the trusts and companies and stuff that you like, but if you're on at 80, 100, 120, 150k salary, you need to start a business, grow your income, and then you'll unlock more serviceability.
Yep. And you're obviously old B money. So is that how you did it?
Well, I mean, I had 6 properties when I was still just doing the Bs, no broking or anything like that. And then I capped out lending wise. So I couldn't borrow anymore. And then I started a business and, over a couple of years, built the income up. And then I went and got to the stage where I could borrow again. So it's the same. I think one of the best ways to do it is when you're young, if you can get yourself on a decent income, whether that's, a lot of young guys are in the mines or doing something where they're making 150, 180K at 22, 23. I speak to young guys that are 23, 24 in the mines and they're on 180, sometimes 200K. If you can take that 200K income when you're young and build up a portfolio of, 4 or 5 properties, something like that, and then by the time you're 30, 35 or so, you can go and refinance a big chunk of equity out and start a business in something that you're good at and got skills at, then you can go and make more income. And that's likely the way that I see most people actually progress to a 10 plus property portfolio is through income growth, not through trusts.
You hit on a good
trust too, but you need income. If you want 10,
say that again.
They combine trusts as well. Like a lot of people in business with big portfolios, they still have trust lending, but it's the income piece that makes the biggest difference.
Yeah, and that's one thing I think I saw you post about. And if you're 22, 23 and you're on 100K plus, you've got 2 routes to go. You could go Land Cruiser, jet ski, or,
Raptor.
Raptor, all the fun sort of toys. Or you could actually realize that this is a point in time where I can set myself up. I think in that post you were talking about high earners actually being kind of terrible with their money. What advice do you have for people who are actually in a situation where you're like, this actually sounds like me, I'm on a pretty good wicket. I love my toys, but I kind of would like to not work when I'm 65 or 80.
Yeah, well, I think that was, again, back to the young guys on a big income doing FIFO and stuff like that. I've got a lot of FIFO clients that they're 25, 28, whatever, and they're making like that, like I said, 180, 200K a year, but they fly to Bali every swing that they're off, and they've got a Land Cruiser, they've got a jet ski, they've got the motorbike, they've got whatever it is, the Gucci shoes, the Gucci belt, all the fancy things. You're better off sacrificing the ego for a couple of years and putting that into some property, because there's no point working the hours that you're working, 70, 80 hours a week on a mine site out in the middle of nowhere if you're just doing it over and over again and getting nowhere. Yeah, the fancy car impresses a few people for about a week and then no one cares. And the people that actually know about money, think you're an idiot or a wanker anyway. They'd be better off seeing you go and buy an investment property somewhere and put your money into something that's going to grow, not rapidly depreciate.
What are some of the things that you see people advising in terms of professional advice, trust advice, financial advice, buyer's agency advice that makes you kind of think, I don't really like this, it doesn't sit very well with me?
I think a lot of clients come to me and they've spoke to a buyer's agent, for example, and they come to me with often a spreadsheet that projects out the next 30 years, and they're going to have this $15 million, $20 million property portfolio in 30 years, or not even 30 years, 10 years, 15 years, whatever it is. The person that's advised them on how to do that, they might have said, you got to go buy through trusts and stuff like that, but they don't understand the lending piece. So I think any type of property strategy, obviously, you can't buy many properties if you don't get the lending piece right. If you don't understand the lending, it doesn't matter how good the deals are that you're getting. If you can only buy 1 or 2, that's not where you want to be. You want to be able to get, like we've been talking about, 4, 5, 6, 10, whatever it is. So I think the first step for most people should not be, going to some buyer's agent, getting advice on the fact that they're going to buy. I have so many people, mate, they come to me, they say, all I want to do is I just want to buy 10 properties in 10 years. I've bought 9 properties in 9 years, so I'll probably get 10 in 10. And I've tried every single day to get that. And I've worked 80, 100 hours a week most of the time. So, you can do it, but it's not that likely if you just working the one job and you're trying to have a balanced life as well. So I think that you got to understand the lending piece before you go out there and speak to a buyer's agent or a financial advisor about the 10 property portfolio you're going to build.
And what I think people might not understand, and that you kind of share, is that you are not your average property investor. No. You understood the value of it very, very early. You're someone that's always willing to speak to people and take their advice. Like you're one of those people that I think no matter how successful you become, you will never be blind to advice that other people give, because you feel like the moment you think you know everything, like the game is lost. But you've worked quite hard, quite diligent. You've researched. You've also built a successful business, and you kind of touched on that before, where a lot of the big buyers agents will say, I've got 10, 20, 30 million properties, but the majority of that portfolio came with that buyer's agency business, which presumably is quite successful. And it is really all just coming down to what is your income when the ATO looks at you as a human being, right? The funny thing is that if you do have 2, you're in the top third of all property investors in Australia, but for some reason it now seems like failure. It seems like not enough, right? And I don't think it's always been that case, but I think there's a real lack of patience with property investment. If we look at, maybe one of the people that was probably most visible, say 15 years ago in property investment space, Chris Gray, he's got that limousine where it's invest for the long term, and he talks about getting rich slow. I kind of feel like if that's the way a buyer's agent comes onto the scene now, they're not going to get any love whatsoever. What's changed? Yes.
So I just need to...
I was talking to a buyer's agent yesterday that was talking about another buyer's agent who apparently has recently bought a boat and talked about how fabulous that is, and good on them, congratulations. But you can actually go online and see that boat and the 1/8 syndicates that are available to purchase in it. But that sort of nuance doesn't make itself known in the Instagram reel. So I think you're hitting on something, right? Like even as individuals, we tend to put the best part of ourselves forward on Instagram. We don't necessarily talk about the hard stuff. I mean, you're very real and honest with what you do, but a buyer's agent is kind of forced to talk about their success. And, there is a temptation to pump it up a little bit. And from what I've seen, I mean, you're seeing their numbers. Like if they're going for a loan and they're using you, you're like, oh, okay. I wonder if people know that it was this sort of situation.
Yeah,
just to be clear with Sam Gordon's legal team, I wasn't talking about him with the boat. And he is, no, I'm not sure. Yeah. But we've had him on the show a few times, and no doubt a tremendously successful bloke. But if Sam Gordon comes to you and wants to buy his next investment property, presumably the bank's going to look at him at a little bit different if he didn't have his buyer's agency business. I'm sure Sam would say that himself. Yeah, and I suppose similar to yourself, he is a 1%er. I mean, he's got his own show called that, and that kind of speaks to his level of dedication and drive as well. So, unless you're prepared to do what people like that have done, you should expect different results. And 2 properties, 4 properties, that's not a bad result. You're actually one of the better property investors in Australia.
It's just...
I love that. I mean, I definitely wanted to speak to you. Look, I
think... You want to do this? You can't.
Yeah. Well, I don't think you're necessarily saying that you can't, but like it's just not comparing yourself to somebody in a situation that's very, very different. I mean, especially if you're looking at a buyer's agent wanting to replicate their results. I know there are some buyer's agents that before they had a business were able to achieve very solid portfolios, but even those ones would say the majority of the growth came on the back end when they have that business. So what is the secret to getting 100 properties? Well, it's earning, $5 million $10 a year, however you do that, be it as a buyer's agent or you start a business or OnlyFans. I know most of your clients are on OnlyFans. It is. Yeah, this is not financial or your body advice.
Your body choice.
And on that note, I think it's probably time to wrap it up before I could smell the censors coming in to cancel the show. But Bill, I just wanted to say a big thank you for keeping it real and giving us the lowdown on trust. They have a part to play, but it's not something that you should duck into trying to replicate someone else's results, and just understand that there's a cost involved, and don't listen to someone on Instagram. Go and actually pay for financial advice. I like that. What a finish.
Practice that, mate.
Cheers, Bill. Thanks, mate. We'll see you next time.